Democrats asked you, and you said you never received any stolen materials. That doesn't appear to be accurate. You also testified that you knew nothing about this scandal until it was public, and if you had suspected anything untoward, you would have reported it. You also testified to Senator Hatch that you never received any document that even appeared to you to have been drafted or prepared by Democratic staff. I also asked you yesterday whether Mr. Miranda asked to meet privately off-site to hand you documents related to Senators Biden and Feinstein. I also asked about him sending you, quote, intel with extraordinary detailed specifics about what I was going to ask a highly controversial nominee just days later, something I never said publicly. I also asked about you receiving a draft, a non-public letter of mine, before any mention was made public. You testified you didn't recall anything specific, but you thought that sharing information between staffs was common. So let me ask you this. Has anyone told you what any Democratic senators have been advised to do by our staff at this hearing?
I think there's been a lot of... There's been a lot of discussion about what individual senators might be interested in, and when I met
I really want to hear what you have to say, Judge, what protesters have to say. Please go ahead. Have you been advised, have you been told what any Democratic senators have been advised to do by our staff at this hearing?
Right. So when I met individually with the 65 senators, including almost every member of the committee, a lot of the senators, a lot of you in the meetings told me issues you were interested in. I think your staff was probably talking to...
No, but has anybody said to you, for example, Senator Leahy's staff is asking him to do this at the hearing tomorrow?
Well, I think you yourself told me what you were going to ask. So I
try to give you a good heads up, and I appreciate the meeting. But anybody else told you this is what Leahy's staff is asking him to ask at the hearing tomorrow?
Again, I think this might be a different kind of process because you all were very transparent when I met with you. I'm looking around and saying, here's what I'm focused on, and here's what I'm going to ask you at the hearings, and it's turned out to you were accurately telling me your concerns.
Okay, and you're saying that's normal, but did anybody hand you anything marked highly confidential
for this
about any one of these senators?
No, I'm not remembering anything like that, but you all did talk about the issues. In other words, there are no surprises. They're not no surprises, but there are, you gave me a basic concerns and issues you want to
I want to make sure
raise.
we're clear on this. Nobody handed you something marked highly confidential, but that is the material you received from Manny Miranda. For example, on July 18, 2002, days before an extremely controversial hearing for Fifth Circuit nominee Priscilla Owen, Mr. Miranda sent you an email with the subject line, highly confidential, informed you that Senator Biden's staff was asking him not to attend the meeting that day. On March 18th, 2003, Mr. Miranda sent you several pages of talking points that were stolen verbatim from Democratic files. The talking points revealed what arguments Democrats were making on another controversial nominee, Miguel Estrada. The subject line of the email stated it was not for distribution, meaning Mr. Miranda was asking you not to share the information. This has now been, as of 3 o'clock this morning, made public. So yesterday when I asked you about these specific events, you said you didn't have any recollection. So I'm not going to ask if you remember receiving this email. I'm going to ask you this. Why would you ever be asked to keep secret Democratic talking points if they were legitimately obtained.
I am looking at these, Senator, and it says, for example, it looks like Biden's staff is asking him not to attend the hearing. I don't know why that.
But look how you received it.
I know, I don't know why that's even confidential, because it.
Whether it is or not, would you consider that somewhat unusual to be receiving from a Republican staff member something marked highly confidential, telling him what he's found out the Democrat's going to do?
Well, as I explained yesterday, Senator, my understanding of this process is that the staffs do talk with one another, that they're not camps with no communication. And that was my experience when I worked in the White House. And so it looks like Biden's staff is asking him not to attend the hearing would have been pretty standard kind of information that would be.
Not really. You read this, I would be amazed if somebody handed me a memo saying this is a confidential memo that Senator Grassley's staff is prepared for him. I not only would not read it, I'd be on the phone immediately to Senator Grassley and say, I'm bringing something over that just arrived to me. You better take a look at it. But you received, on July 28, 2002, an email from Manny Miranda that said, my staff distributed a confidential letter to Democratic councils, not to Republicans. Mr. Miranda said, I received that letter in the strictest confidence. You were asked explicitly by Mr. Miranda to take no action on the email without his further instructions. He never asked him how he obtained the letter sent in strict confidence to me. And then July 30th, 2002, you received an email from Miranda saying they had on 100% info that I was convening a meeting about a controversial nominee. And then further in August 13, 2002, emailing obviously taken from my internal emails what I was going to do. Did any of this raise a red flag in your mind?
It did not, Senator, because it all seemed consistent with the usual kinds of discussions that happen. And sometimes people do say things of, here's what my boss is thinking, but don't share it around. I mean, I must have had, so many conversations in the course of my life like that, where someone's saying like that about something. In other words, trying to give you a heads up on something. And that just seems standard Senate staff. So nothing, the direct answer to your question is, for example, looks like Biden's staff's not asking him not to attend the hearing. That wouldn't have raised anything at all for me other than
Not even where it came from. On June 5th, 2003, you received an email from a Republican Senate staffer with the subject line, spying. That is not overly subtle. This staffer appears in over 1,000 documents we received together with both you and Mr. Miranda. She says she has a mole for us, and so forth. None of this raised a red flag with you?
It did not, Senator. Again, people have friends across the aisle who they talk to. At least this was my experience back then. Maybe it's changed. And there was a lot of bipartisanship on the committee. There was a lot of bipartisanship among the staffs. There were a lot of friendships and relationships where people would talk to, I've got a friend on Ted Kennedy's staff, or I have a friend on Senator Hatch's staff, or I have a friend on Senator Specter's staff. That kind of conversation and information sharing was common. So it did not raise the flags.
Judge, I was born at night, but not last night. And if I had something that somebody said, we've stolen this, or this is how, don't tell anybody we have this, I think it'd raise some red flags. Now, we only have a fraction of your record. And I do thank the chairman for opening us up at 3 this morning. But as you know, the president has asserted executive privilege. The first time we've had to face this up here on a nominee from either Republicans or Democrats, of 102,000 pages of material, 102,000 from just your time in the White House. That includes a lot on judicial nominations. Can you confirm for me today that in that 102,000 pages, there are no emails from Mr. Miranda marked highly confidential or do not share or take no action on this, describing what he has found out the Democrats are thinking?
Senator, I am not involved in the documents process, so I don't know what's in them.
Well, that is convenient. But we don't know what's in them either, because we've never had so much withheld before. We don't know what's in all the documents. They're still being gone through by the archives because this is being rushed through and we don't get a chance to see them. That's not fair to us. And frankly, Judge, it's not fair to you. You've probably been told you have the votes to be confirmed, so you don't have to care. But I care. I care about the integrity of the Supreme Court. I care about who's on there. I think you should care what's in that, just as we should care what's in it. There are even more documents than I had time to discuss today. I find it impossible to reconcile what you're regularly being told, that your testimony that you received nothing stolen, had no reason to suspect anything was stolen, when, frankly, as we now know, Republican staffer Manny Miranda stole things. And some of the things he stole went directly to you. But let me ask you another one. You testified in 2004 that aside from participating in a moot court argument, you did not work in the nomination of Judge William Pryor. Now, he was a controversial nominee. He called Roe versus Wade the worst abomination in the history of constitutional law. He argued that constitutional right to same-sex intimacy would logically extend to activities like necrophilia, bestiality, pedophilia. You said you didn't work on his nomination personally, but you did participate in the Pryor working group, did you not?
We all were met, just so you know the process. There was something called the White House, I think, Judicial Selection Committee, and Judge Gonzalez, the counsel to the president, chaired that committee. And that started immediately after President Bush came into office in 2001. And so we would meet with memos, and individual members of the staff would be assigned to different regions.
Did you interview William Pryor?
I don't believe so. It's possible, but I don't believe so. But if I did, it would have been part of the general process where people came in.
I'd put in the record or Exhibit C, which said you did interview him.
It's possible. We interviewed hundreds of nominees, as I said, Senator, and we met every week for several years to go over nominees. And we worked closely with the home state senators. I had various states for district court. I had Illinois. I had California I worked on, Senator Feinstein, Senator Boxer's staff, Maryland, Senator Sarbanes and Senator Mikulski. But then we would sit in sometimes on interviews of other people who came in, and then we would meet and go over the memos. Then we would meet with the president. We met every week with the president before September 11th. After September 11th, those meetings became less frequent.
You had recommended him internally for the 11th Circuit seat, had you not?
Well, I have no reason that I wouldn't have recommended him, because he was a highly qualified Attorney General of Alabama, and Senator Sessions, of course, knew him well, and he was well respected.
The only reason I asked was that one of the emails that we have up here says, Brett, at your request, I asked Matt to speak with Pryor about his interests. I'm not asking these questions to to get you in a bind, Judge, I'm asking them because it is so easy on these hearings to say, I don't remember, and oftentimes that's the case. But you mentioned Mr. Gonzalez. He had difficulty remembering when he came here. He had one hearing where, so he wouldn't have that problem. I gave him, I think, 35, 45 of the questions ahead of time. On every one of them, he said, I don't remember, I don't recall. And then every question asked, almost every question asked by both Republicans and Democrats said, I don't recall, I don't remember. Shortly after that, he went to private practice. But the I think it is so difficult when that you don't remember the things done by somebody who I think on both sides of the aisle we would agree is one of the most egregious breaches of committee confidentiality when Manny Miranda stole material from here, stole it to send it to you and others at the White House. You have no recollection of that.
I obviously recall the emails, or have seen the emails, but your question, your larger question was, did that raise a red flag? And I've answered that no.
Well, when you were in the White House, was part of your job to coach President Bush's judicial nominees how to answer Democrats' questions about Roe versus Wade?
Part of our job would have been to prepare nominees more generally, and it was common for senators to ask that question then as it is now. And so I assume that we would have been involved in going through mock sessions. I know we were involved in going through mock sessions, which is very standard for Democratic.
Well, you've been going through some mock sessions with at least one Republican senator from this committee and other Republican senators, and I'm not saying that is a gotcha thing. You have every right to do that. You did advise Priscilla Owen exactly how she should respond to that according to one of the emails. And my last question, do you agree that a plastic firearm created with a 3D printer, something we would not have been in the minds of our founding fathers at the 18th century, would you agree that that could be regulated or banned without creating any Second Amendment questions?
I think there might be litigation coming on that, Senator, so consistent with judicial independence principles, I shouldn't comment on a potential case like that, so thank you.
I actually written out your answer ahead of time. And I just wrote it so that you did not see what I wrote. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce into the record an op-ed from the LA Times editorial board entitled, "Can the Supreme Court Confirmation Process Ever Be Repaired?" A bipartisan letter from 23 of Judge Kavanaugh's classmates at Yale. A letter signed by hundreds of Yale students, alumni, and faculty. A letter from Georgia's Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. An op-ed in the Clarion Ledger by Mississippi Governor Bill Bryant. So I'd ask that that be allowed. Just say without objection. That's good. Okay. All right. Thank you, Judge. There are several things I want to go over with you. One, I want to compliment Senator Lee in this regard that he worked with Senator Grassley to get what had been previously committee confidential released to the public. And so that's the way it works around here. You don't always get what you want, but you try to work with your colleagues, and many times you can succeed. From a public's point of view, it's got to work this way. you just can't do everything you want in a legislative body. There are rules, and it's frustrating to be told no on something you're passionate about. But I'm often asked, people wonder, are these hearings turning into a circus? And I want to defend circuses. Circuses are entertaining, and you can take your children to them. This hearing is neither entertaining nor appropriate for young people. Now, some of my colleagues, who I respect greatly, are trying to make a point. I don't know what that point is. But I do know this: if you want to be president, which I can understand that, it's hard. And what you do will be the example others will follow. Back to the subject matter, the Morrison case. Was that about separation of powers?
That was a separation of powers case.
Okay. It was about a congressional statute and the authority of the executive branch and how they interacted. Is that correct? That's
correct, and a very specific statutory scheme that was unprecedented, had the judiciary involved in appointing the counsel.
And apparently, Kagan and Scalia agreed.
Yes.
Well, but Kagan agreed with Scalia's dissent.
She's called it one of the greatest ever written, and she's added it gets better every year.
Well, I don't want to get in the habit of saying listen to Elena Kagan, but I will here. Because she's a fine person. The situation we have before us about Mr. Mueller, that's not a separation of powers issue, is it? Aren't these different facts? That Mr. Mueller was appointed through Department of Justice regulations.
Senator, I don't want to talk specifically about current events, but I will just refer back to what I've written previously about special counsel.
I'm not asking you to how to decide a case. I'm just asking, do you read the paper? Do you watch television? The special counsel statute in question doesn't exist anymore, does it?
The independent counsel statute
independent counsel
does not exist anymore
Okay.
since 1999.
Okay.
The traditional special counsel system I've written about is the ordinary way that outside
But
investigation.
is that an executive branch function?
That is ordinarily appointed by the Attorney General and is
Who's a member of what?
the executive branch.
So last time I checked, that's not a separation of powers issue.
That traditionally, as I've written, has been an executive branch.
Now, the question is, if someone is appointed as special counsel by Department of Justice regulations, who has authority over implementing those regulations and overseeing those regulations? All I can say is that that's different legally and factually than the Morrison situation where you had a statute. Let's talk a little bit about the law regarding the president. Clinton v. Jones tells us, see if I'm correct, that you can be president of the United States, you can still be sued for conduct before you were president, and when you invoke executive privilege, the court has said, no, wait a minute, you have to show up at a deposition because it happened before you were president. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a civil suit was the Clinton versus Jones case involving allegations that, or a suit that had involved activity before President Clinton became president.
Okay. So it's pretty well understood through Supreme Court precedent that if you're the president of the United States and you engaged in conduct that allowed you to be sued before you got to be president, you can't avoid your day in court and on the civil side. The Nixon holding said what?
The Nixon holding said that in the context of the specific regulations there, that a criminal trial subpoena to the president for information, in that case the tapes, could be enforced, notwithstanding the executive privilege that was recognized in that case as rooted in Article 2 of the Constitution.
So that's the law of the land as of this moment.
That United States versus Nixon is the law of the land.
Okay, now whether or not a president can be indicted while in office has been a discussion that's gone on for a very long time. Is that true in the legal world?
That's correct. The Department of Justice for the last 45 years has taken the consistent position through Republican and Democratic administrations that a sitting president may not be indicted while in office. The most thorough opinion on that is written by Randy Moss, who was head of President Clinton's Office of Legal Counsel in 2000. He's now a district judge appointed by President Obama on the district court in D.C.
I think you have written on this topic as well, haven't you?
I've not written on the constitutionality.
You're talking about whether or not it would be wise to do this.
I've made my thoughts known for Congress to examine because in the wake of September 11th, I thought one of the things Congress could look at is how to make the presidency more effective.
I just want my Democratic colleagues to remind you that when President Clinton was being investigated, you took the position that he's not above the law, but in terms of indicting a sitting president, it would be better for the country to wait.
Hi guys, if you are watching our stream today, you are here in the newsroom live on this Thursday, September 6th, and we are also tracking a top story here from our sort of local jurisdiction here in the DMV area. So we're going to jump back to the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings when we can shortly, but I do want to show you, we have a podium shot up right now of a case that is now somewhat closed officially because of some of the details which we'll explain to you. Back in September, 31-year-old Laura Wallen was found dead. She was actually 13 weeks pregnant at the time, and the person charged in that was her fiance, I believe, actually her boyfriend, Tyler Tessier, who was slated to stand trial today. Today was to be the first day of his trial. He was actually found dead in his cell this morning, and it's a bit of breaking news, kind of a shocker here in the DC community. So if you're not local to this area, maybe you're not as familiar with this case, but it definitely is an important one here in Montgomery County. The state's attorney will be speaking today in just a few moments to sort of outline what exactly happened and sort of sum up what happened here. We're also supposedly hearing from Laura's father himself, Mark Wallen. So that's what we're expecting in a couple of minutes here. Our reporter, Bob Barnard, is there inside the courtroom here, or the courthouse in this lobby area where they'll be staging this for you guys. So we're going to take that in just a second, just so you know that's up on the radar, coming up shortly. And until then, we'll keep covering inside the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, day 3, day 2 of questioning. You can see Lindsey Graham right now asking some questions, Senator Graham. So we'll jump back over there. If you guys have any questions or comments, please do let us know in the live chat. We'll try to answer them for you as this continues. But again, going over to this local case in just a few moments. But for now, we'll go back to Capitol Hill, take you inside the Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing room, and a live look at kind of both parties here, a split screenshot of Brett Kavanaugh, SCOTUS nominee, and the senators also.
Written in the document.
Senator, the Supreme Court has recognized the right to abortion since the 1973 Roe v. Wade case and has reaffirmed it many times.
But my question is, did they find a phrase in the Constitution that said that the state cannot interfere with a woman's right to choose until medical viability occurs? Is that in the Constitution?
So the Supreme Court applying the liberty...
It's pretty simple. No, it's not, Senator Graham.
Well, I want to...
Those words.
I want to be very careful because this is a topic on which...
No, if you'll just follow me, I'll let you talk. But the point is, will you tell me, yes or no, is there anything in the document itself talking about limiting the state's ability to protect the unborn before viability? Is there any phrase in the Constitution about abortion?
The Supreme Court has found it under the Liberty Clause, but you're right that specifically...
Well, is there anything in the Liberty Clause talking about abortion?
The Liberty Clause refers to liberty,
okay,
but not,
well,
does not
last
have
time
specific...
I checked, liberty
Yeah.
didn't equate to abortion. The Supreme Court said it did, but here's the point. What are the limits on this concept? You had 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 judges. What are the limits on the ability of the court to find a penumbra of rights that apply to a particular situation? What are the checks and balances of people in your business, if you can find 5 people who agree with you, to confer a right, whether the public likes it or not, based on this concept of a penumbra of rights? What are the outer limits to this?
The Supreme Court in the Glucksberg case, which is in the late 90s, Justice Kagan talked about this at her hearing, is the the test that the Supreme Court uses to find unenumerated rights under the Liberty Clause of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, and that refers to rights rooted in the history and tradition of the country, so as to prevent.
So let me ask you this. Is there any right rooted in the history and traditions of the country where legislative bodies could not intercede on behalf of the unborn before medical viability? Is that part of our history?
The Supreme Court precedent has recognized the right to abortion. I'm sorry.
But I'm just saying, what part of the history of I don't think our founding fathers, people mentioned our founding fathers, I don't remember that being part of American history. So how did the court determine that it was?
The court applied the precedent that existed and found in 1973 that under the Liberty Clause.
Yeah, but before 1970, I mean, when you talk about the history of the United States, the court has found that part of our history is for the legislative bodies not to have a say about protecting the unborn until medical viability. I haven't, whether you agree with it or not, I don't think that's part of our history. So fill in the blank. What are the limits of people in your business applying that concept to almost anything that you think to be liberty?
And that is the concern that some have expressed about the concept of unenumerated rights.
Well, here's the concern I have, that you got one word that has opened up the ability for 5 people to tell everybody elected in the country, you can't go there. That this is an off limits for in a democratic process. Whether you agree with Roe v. Wade or not, just think what could happen down the road if 5 people determine the word liberty means X. The only real check and balance is a constitutional amendment to change the ruling. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I'm not going to comment on potential constitutional amendments.
But, okay, how, if we pass a statute tomorrow in Congress saying that the Congress can regulate abortions before medical liability, wouldn't it?
We restart the show at noon and give everybody just joining us exactly what happened. This has been a traumatic morning for so many people in downtown Cincinnati, and this is what happened.
Yeah, so starting at 9:10 this morning, we know that a shooter, according to Cincinnati police, walked in to the Fifth Third building loading dock and started firing. Officers responded within seconds, according to Chief Elliot Isaac. 3 or 4 officers engaged that shooter. There was an exchange of gunfire, we know, between them and the shooter in the loading dock and then into the lobby. We know that several people were shot. In fact, 5 were. We know 3 people have died. 2 others are at UC Medical Center. We do not know the extent of their injuries at this point. The FBI, the ATF, Cincinnati Police, Homeland Security, and the FBI, we just mentioned that, but also SWAT, they're all on the scene downtown near Fountain Square where it all happened. We know that the weapon was recovered from the scene, but multiple shots were fired. Witnesses were all there talking about what was going on. Rob Williams is down there at the scene as well. He's been talking with witnesses throughout the morning as well. Rob, what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, let's tell you about the most dramatic story we heard from a witness. She was an employee at Cervati's, which is at the base of the Fifth Third building right there. She said she heard shots, and she said she heard a lot of them, and they were in quick succession. She said she heard about 20. That's when the employees there at Cervati's were told to go on lockdown. She and 2 other employees hid in the bathroom for about 20 minutes until they were given the all clear. The scene is starting to ramp down a little bit. I don't know if you can see the bridge. They used to be part of the old Skywalk system here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And as you can see, people are coming out of the Fifth Third building. When we took the press conference with Chief Elliot Isaac, he said people were still in the building. That press conference occurred about an hour ago. And now we're starting to see some of the employees kind of safely get out of the Fifth Third building. As you mentioned, they're going to start trying to open up some of the roads, but right now, many of them remain shut down. I don't know if you can see Fountain Square from here, but it is almost like a sea of caution tape. Caution tape is up, blocking the square, blocking the roads, blocking the sidewalks. Downtown Cincinnati, even though they're trying to open up some of the streets, it's still a mess in terms of trying to maneuver around. It's even hard to walk around. I live on 7th Street, and as I walk downtown, it took me probably 3 times as long to actually get to Fountain Square. I actually was at underneath the bridge between Macy's and Carew Tower. That walk usually takes me about 10 minutes. Today, it probably took me about 30 minutes because of all the barricades that are set up. Now, let me just tell you about the barricades before you head down here. My advice to you would be don't head down here if you don't have to. There are barricades really on 5th Street to the south, Walnut Street to the east, 6th Street to the north, and what is that? Probably Vine Street to the west. But the perimeters are even further out than that when you talk about traffic. This is just foot traffic, like I cannot cross these lines that have been set up. I said earlier that I've never seen police presence like this on a scene, and I've been in this town, covering this town for 20 years. But it's starting to wind down a little bit. Probably 20 minutes ago, I saw probably 5 fire trucks leave the scene, but many, as you can see, still remain. I don't know when the roads are going to open up, but if you know anything about my location right now, it's very close to the big Metro transit station. It's not just a bus stop, it's a transit station because people use it as a hub to go somewhere else. And right now, that's on the inside of the caution tape, so if you had to catch a bus, you wouldn't catch it from that location. Once again, we heard during the press conference that they're going to have another update. We don't know exactly when that is, but there's still a lot of questions in terms of who the shooter was, his relationship to Fifth Third employees, and the people who were shot and killed, and the 2 people who were in the hospital in critical condition. So there's still much more of this story to come. Let's hear from the chief when he talked with us earlier today.
Well, we know at this point about 9:10 this morning, a call was received at our emergency communications section regarding shots being fired here at number 38 Fountain Square, the Fifth Third Center. What we know is an individual entered the loading dock area of the building, began firing shots, then proceeded to the lobby area of the building where he was engaged by several of our officers. There were gunshots exchanged. At this point, the shooter is deceased. We also have 5 victims, additional victims that sustained injuries. Of those 5, we have received word that 3 of those 5 are deceased as well. So a very horrific situation.
Okay, so that's the police chief talking right there. We didn't play it in that soundbite, but he did say that downtown Cincinnati is safe right now. I asked City Councilman Greg Landsman about what does it mean when a shooting happens near Fountain Square, and Fountain Square is seen with people running away from a shooting scene because Fountain Square is the city's living room. If you have a shooting in your neighborhood, you're not as scared as if that shooting happened in your living room, and that's exactly what happened here earlier today. Here's the mayor now, because he also talked with us after the chief.
First, my prayers go out to the victims, at least 3 deceased who appear to be innocent victims, 2 more that are suffering in the hospitals. So we send our prayers to them. We don't know their names or their identities yet.
So that's Mayor John Cranley talking with us earlier. The one thing I should mention, because it's been said a couple of different times, the response by police was swift and efficient. I talked with a witness who was whose job is to water the planters outside of Weston, and he told us that he heard he saw people running out of the building. He didn't hear shots at that point, and in less than a minute, he saw a female police officer pull up in her vehicle, get out with her guns drawn. Now, he said he heard shots after that, and then he saw more people running out of Fountain Square. So once again, we're seeing more people leaving work from the Fifth Third building. They're crossing that overpass, that pedestrian overpass, and probably getting into their cars and going home. Because the chief told us when he had that press conference that there were still people inside the building, and they're trying to figure out a safe way to get them all out of the building so they can continue their day. I think Jessica said it earlier. Usually downtown Cincinnati would be filled with people lining the streets trying to figure out what to do for lunch. Many of them would be eating lunch on Fountain Square. Obviously, that's not going to happen today. I should mention that I live downtown, and my walk over here, and even right now, it's eerily quiet because I think a lot of people felt like they were just going to go home after experiencing this, even though everyone, like the mayor and the chief, have told us downtown Cincinnati is incredibly safe. Councilman Landsman said this too. He goes, when the stories come out of the first responders and how they responded, we're going to hear a lot of stories about heroes. We'll send it back over to you.
Rob, thank you so much. You know, we talked about the investigation process that's going on right now. A lot of officers are on the scene right now where it all happened, near the Fifth Third Bank on Fountain Square, 511 Walnut. You can see certain areas there on this map of the location, that central location. But we can tell you that officers are still going to be doing this investigation for a while. This is going to be a long time now. We can tell you that officers are going to be looking at security cameras, also the officers' body cameras from the 3 or 4 officers that engaged the shooter. So we have a ways to go here. And as we get those details, of course, we'll let you know.
Also a live look at Fountain Square right now. We do want to let you know downtown street closures due to this investigation are in place. Walnut from 5th to 6th, 5th from Walnut to Race, and northbound traffic on Vine from 3rd to 6th are all restricted because of this investigation going on right now. So as those loved ones are cleared floor by floor from the Fifth Third Center, they're going to be exiting, we do imagine, downtown. And again, it's kind of hairy to get out of there right now because of this police presence. Again, Rob talking about how quiet it is. This all happened to give you perspective. It's 12:09. The first 911 call went out at 9:10 this morning. Again, centered around that Fifth Third Center. The camera's right there. We're giving you a live look. And that's really where this shooter engaged innocent people this morning.
So you're getting that live look of where it all happened. This is a very busy area. A lot of folks going to that Cervantes right there. We talked to witnesses who work at that Cervantes, and here's what they had to say.
All I know is when I came from the back, there were numerous amounts of gunshots, and then after that, it was more and more. It was a total of maybe 20 to 30 gunshots. We did not see anything. We just know we were told to take cover, lock the doors, and we were on lockdown until further notice. We went in the bathroom and we locked ourselves in the bathroom and shut the door. We were in there for about 30 to 45 minutes.
How scary was that for you?
It was very scary because all we had was each other. We all have kids at home. First thing that goes through your mind is your kids, your family. You don't know when you're going to see them, you know, and the fact that how close this was, those bullets could have came through the walls. So at this point, it's just glad that everybody that was working with us is okay, can get home to their families. The Fifth Third people that did not make it, I pray for them and their families. And I just hope that this all can be resolved.
That was one witness talking about her experience, clearly rattled as anyone would be in a situation like that. Sharice Gibson has been working her sources as well. She has an update for us.
Yeah, this morning we're getting an update from the Diocese of Southern Ohio. They released a statement from Bishop Thomas Breedenthal regarding this morning's shooting. He said, and I quote part, "The active shooter situation this morning in downtown Cincinnati is yet another reminder of the impact that violence has on us all. The fact that this event happened only 2 blocks from my office makes the shock of all such shootings even more real. Please join me in praying for the victims and their families as they deal with this tragedy. And also, we're seeing somewhat of what I would like to consider maybe a movement here, showing bravery in the face of this tragedy. I told you earlier that PG Sittenfeld describing Fountain Square as one of our sacred places. He's so right for that, a place for joy and a place for protest and coming together. The actions, he says, of one sick man doesn't change that, and that's not what our city needs or what our city is. He'll be eating lunch on Fountain Square. One of the witnesses who was actually there, Cam Hardy, who is with the Better Bus Coalition, he says that he will join PG tomorrow for lunch on Fountain Square. He said, this is our city and we cannot let it beat us. I'm praying for all involved and grateful for the lady that grabbed my wrist and started running as we heard 10 shots. So that is just coming down. So this could possibly become a movement here of people showing solidarity and bravery again in the face of tragedy here in Cincinnati. Something that we have heard. We've seen these shootings happen throughout the nation. We've not heard of it happening right here in our own city, but already we are seeing Cincinnatians come and put together the hashtag that says Cincinnati Strong. A lot of people are showing a strong face, and they will be out there tomorrow doing things as they would normally do during that lunch hour. So, of course, we'll be out there live, and we, of course, will continue to follow along with this. So, Dana, just wanted to give you that update. And as soon as I get some more, I'll bring it out to you.
Well, and speaking of that, there is a prayer service taking place right now at Christ Church Cathedral in response to that shooting, again, happening in downtown Cincinnati. That church, we're told, will be open all day long for the community to gather. It's people of all denominations gathering. And also, if you're thinking or listening out there about something that you can do to help, again, these victims, because we do have victims at UC Medical Center receiving treatment as we speak, Hawksworth Blood Center is encouraging anyone to go donate blood. That blood that is on reserve downtown and every other campus around Cincinnati goes to these situations, sadly. And again, we have been reporting a lot of these victims who we saw in pictures and video coming out of this Fifth Third Center were taken to UC Medical Center with a loss of blood. And it's so important that if you're finding yourself asking, why did this happen in Cincinnati? What can I do? That is an active thing you can do this morning. That is the picture I'm talking about. We're sadly seeing a lot more of these coming out on Twitter now. People in the Fifth Third Center snapping these photos as these innocent people are being put into ambulances and taken to UC Medical Center. It's unbelievable.
Okay, let's go out to Deborah Lynch, who's live at UC Medical Center right now, where we know some of the victims who were injured are. What can you tell us now?
Well, let me tell you right now that police have just cleared the scene here at UC Medical Center. You can see they are no longer here, and the hospital has resumed normal operations. They just left the scene here about 10-15 minutes ago. And sadly, what we saw, I'd say maybe about a half hour ago, was very sad. A woman pulled up in a pickup truck here. She was in scrubs, and she was absolutely sobbing. She appeared to be a relative of one of the victims. We're not sure about that, but she was absolutely sobbing. She fell into the arms of the police officers who were stationed out here securing the area, and then she was taken into the hospital. We did receive an update from UC Health, and what they said is they received 4 of the victims, 3 males and 1 female. 2 are deceased. 1 is in critical condition.
Right around here. Yeah, maybe just lean in the front there. And then they can stand right in here, right around you. Everybody gathered around. Okay, good afternoon. Everybody got their lighting and sound ready? Got a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Ramon Koreanoff. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office. Thank you for coming here today under very trying circumstances. We do have the rundowns, which I've distributed to you, so you know that it'll be Mr. McCarthy, the State's Attorney for Montgomery County, making a brief statement, and then he'll take a few questions and answers. I will be pointing out to the reporters in order. We need to keep this moving and also organized. So raise your hand. I will point to you, and your designation to ask Mr. McCarthy a question will then come, and then we'll keep moving on that front. And then as soon as we wrap up the brief question answer, the family members, per the rundown, will make their brief statements. And then back to Mr. McCarthy, where he'll do a presentation briefly to show you some of the things that would have transpired in court today. Without further ado, the state's attorney for Montgomery County, John McCarthy.
I would like to begin by thanking you for being here, and I'd like to thank my colleague and friend, the Chief of Police from Montgomery County, Tom Manger, for joining us here today. Obviously, today began considerably differently than the men and women who'd been working on this case for a year thought it was going to turn out. I will tell you, I'm honored as we stand here today to be with the Wallen family that are standing behind me, along with their daughter Jen and their son-in-law John. And there are other victims in this case besides Laura, besides Reed, the child she was carrying. There are many victims, the people that stand with me, and there are a lot of collateral victims of the work of Mr. Tessier over many, many years. The young woman who was the other young woman to whom he was engaged was with us today. And I will tell you, she's been with us this morning and is not standing with me now for personal reasons. But she is every bit as much a victim as any of the other people that stand with me right now at this time. Today, we were supposed to have the opening statements in what was anticipated to be a 3-week trial to show the overwhelming evidence that had been gathered over the last year by members of the Montgomery County Police Department and members of my own office, showing that Tyler Tessier was the individual who killed Laura Wallen back on September 3rd of last year. We were robbed this morning of the opportunity to allow the public to know the true nature and details of this crime, which would have been set out over 3 weeks by the fact of his own cowardice when he took his own life sometime between 4:45 and 5:55 this morning at the Montgomery County Jail. I will tell you, he was being housed at the jail in one of the typical pods at the jail. These are individual cells. Mr. Tessier was not in isolation. He was in a single cell area on a pod where 15 other inmates were also housed. He had been checked and seen by members of the jail alive and well in his cell less than 10 minutes before he was discovered deceased. He had gotten up at about 4 o'clock in the morning and showered between 4 and 4:15. He'd been seen again about 4:36. He was given breakfast at 4:45 and was found dead in his cell at 4:55. There were no signs of foul play. Now, I will tell you, out of respect, the police have their work to do because any death that occurs in custody must be fully investigated. But there are no signs of foul play, and this case has all the apparent signs of a suicide. I would also indicate to you that there are a series of notes that give strength to my statement that this appears to be a suicide, because there are multiple notes that I will not go into a detail out of respect for the police investigation. It's not complete. There will come a time when it is completed that we will release those letters to you, but because the investigation is ongoing and some of the individuals to whom the notes were written have not seen those notes, out of consideration for those individuals, we feel we have to share the notes with them. And when the investigation is done, you will see the notes that he wrote. Clearly, when you read the notes, you will know that he had been contemplating for some period of time taking his own life. It appeared the notes are not dated notes, but other information that we've gathered through other sources today lead us to believe that he had been speaking to other family members about those notes for some period of time. These notes were not written, I would suggest, in the last 24 hours, probably over the last several weeks or days. Today would have been a reckoning for Mr. Tessier. Today would have been a reckoning, because for the first time, an individual who I think showed every signs of being a psychopath He had psychopathic behavior that he carried on as he maintained a dual relationship with two women, one for 10 years, a second for 7 years, lying to virtually every single person in his life. To Tyler Tessier, lying was like breathing. He lied about everything. This case was meant, if it went to trial, you would have seen about 10 to 12 hours of video and audio tape from Mr. Tessier. And I will tell you, there are so many stories, so many lies, and so many changes to what he said happened in this case. It's impossible to catalog all the lies and all the people to whom he in fact did lie to maintain this dual existence, this dual relationship with two women in particular, but others as well. The evidence against Mr. Tessier includes, and we were not going to use this at trial, and some of you who covered the motions hearings are aware of this. There was a statement made by Mr. Tessier on September the 13th, the day that he was arrested, where he admitted he shot Ms. Wallen in the back of the head with a .22 caliber weapon. He made that admission. For a variety of legal reasons, that piece of evidence would not have been used at trial, but the evidence against him remained overwhelming. There also is a text that he wrote to the other young woman, not Laura Wallen, the Sunday before the killing took place. The killing did take place on the Sunday before Labor Day last year. We're almost exactly a year away from when this took place. The anniversary of Laura's death passed earlier this week. And what had happened was Laura Wallen grew suspicious, as she had on many other occasions, about whether or not he was carrying on a relationship with another woman. And so she reached out to that other woman and said, I need to speak to you woman to woman about what's happening here. She didn't reveal that she was pregnant at the time, but asked this woman to meet with her. That woman told Mr. Tessier she'd been contacted by Laura Wallen. In a series of texts back and forth between the other woman, the defendant at one point in time says, I could literally kill her for what she's done. That statement was a statement made in a text to the other woman approximately 1 week before he executed Miss Wallen in a field in Gaithersburg, adjacent to a farm where he worked regularly. Some of you know that I asked for us to do a site visit to the location where Miss Wallen's body was found. I will tell you, it's an overwhelming experience to walk that 1.2 miles back, go up and down those hills, go down into a ravine, and see where she was buried. No one who was not familiar with that location would have selected that location for her to be killed. The irony was, in the week after he had killed her, the defendant, in a separate conversation, was talking to some other individuals about a friend that they had in common who was having problems with a boyfriend. And the people in this joint kind of group conversation, this was on the 7th or 8th of September, she was killed on the 5th, on the 8th of September, was talking about, well, you know what, if we kill him, this guy who was abusing his girlfriend, there's lots of fields where bodies can be buried in Montgomery County. That was in a separate conversation about a separate person. May I say, I know you probably have questions. I want to just, again, I oftentimes sit here and tell you how extraordinary the police department is for Montgomery County. But I've been doing it about 38 years. I've listened to some interviews, and I've watched the way the men and women of this wonderful department work. This is among their finest hours. The interviews that were done of Mr. Tessier, and there were numerous interviews, were extraordinarily professionally done, catching him in lie after lie after lie. And it was some of the best police work and best interviewing I've ever heard in my entire career. Chief, I want to thank the men and women of your department for the wonderful work they did and acknowledge how extraordinary they were. I'd also, may I say, and there's so many, some of the detectives, I know Detective Janney, Detective Colbert, Katie Leggett, look, I could read you a list of 100 people who are responsible for why we're here today, but I also want to thank Mary Herdman and Donna Fenton, who are the two lawyers in my office. These are extraordinarily talented women. Let me tell you, they've lived and breathed this case for a very long time. I'm telling you, I'm very proud. I am disappointed for them that they didn't have the opportunity as professional attorneys to make the full presentation so you would know the full weight of what they did to help bring justice to the Wallen family. But I'm honored by the work they've done and honored to work with the men and women of the police department every day. We're going to do something extraordinary here today that we've never done before. We have segments of a PowerPoint that I want to outline for you. If you'll bear with us for a little bit, some of the evidence that we would have detailed during the course of this trial. I'll take a couple of your questions, let some of the other people talk, but we're going to come back and we're going to do a PowerPoint for you, trying to summarize the depth and the breadth and the quality of the evidence that was gathered against Tyler Tessier, because we think it would be a shame, robbed of the opportunity to prove his guilt in a courtroom, which we would have welcomed, for you not to know the wealth of the evidence that was gathered against this man. There should be no question in no one's mind in this county that this was Laura Wallen's killer. Having said that, I'd like to call upon Mark Wallen to come forward and make a few comments. Mark?
Hi, thank you all for attending today. Our daughter Laura was love and light. She is absolutely missed, and we were robbed of the trial, but we were also robbed of not having a trial for our grandson, who was also murdered. The legislators in Maryland have not seen fit to agree on anything about the horrible problems there are with killing pregnant women and the fact that it is a major problem in the state of Maryland. It has been a year, almost to September 3rd, where we have been waiting for this day, and it has been a very difficult year for our entire family. We have been uplifted by our faith community and by the members of Howard County that have totally supported us through our endeavors, and meals and gifts, and people just totally reaching out to us in the most kind and supportive ways. And to that, I want to thank the community and our faith community. Laura was a wonderful, remarkable woman, and I don't believe that there is such a thing as closure, but the year, including today, has been a day where it feels like people have thrown bricks at our head and we've had to dodge. And at this point, we can move on, and we can hopefully remember our daughter as the wonderful woman that she was, and we will not, unfortunately, know our grandson Reed, but it is a tough day for our family to not have this trial happen. And I want to thank the Montgomery County Police and the State's Attorney's Office. They've been so supportive to us and have been absolutely phenomenal. And thank you.
Laura's mother, Gwen Wallen.
I mostly just wanted to thank everybody in the community and our law enforcement, the schools that Laura taught at, Wild Lake High School and Murray Hill Middle School, but mostly John McCarthy from the state's attorney, our state's attorney, and Mary Herdman and Donna Fenton for their amazing work. I anticipated this day, but I dreaded this day too. Because of the rules of how the trial was going to go, I was not going to be able to be in the courtroom while my daughter Jen described to the world her wonderful sister. So for me, that was especially hard because I felt I had already not been able to protect Laura. And again, I would not be able to protect Jennifer. I also asked John McCarthy yesterday if it would be okay when he asked me about my family, if I would tell the world that I have 2 daughters, Jennifer and Laura. People say, I'm sorry for your loss, but I want you all to know Laura's not lost. She's with her Savior, and I will be with her one day. And the second thing I asked was, will it make the defense attorney angry if I tell him that I have 3 grandsons? Because till the day I die, I will have had 2 daughters and 3 grandsons, Reed being our 3rd grandson. And Mr. McCarthy said, you absolutely will tell your story. And so I'm telling you now that as awful as today is, I feel at peace because I worried for my family and I worried for my other 2 grandsons to have such a diabolical human, if you can call him that, still in the world. But again, I also have immense gratitude because we're taught in our faith that God only gives you what you can handle. And I kept thinking, it's getting to be too much. It's just getting to be too much. And today I feel grateful that God is merciful and has given us the ability to move on and talk about Laura and the wonderful things that she's done in the world. Thank you.
Jen Cotty, Laura's sister.
I'm not as good with so I have notes. Good afternoon. I am so very thankful and grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you for a moment. My name is Jennifer Cotty, and Laura Wallen is my beautiful and profoundly special sister. What I want to say is thank you. Thank you to law enforcement, to Katie, Mark, and Buck. You all brilliantly are why we have her back and why some families never get Laura back in the first place. You found my sister, and that is such a gift. To all of the detectives, police officers, forensic analyzers, and tech experts, thank you for all of your hard work. We only know a fraction of all of the tedious details that needed to be figured out. To Donna, Mary, and John, words can never express how eternally grateful we are. You are 3 of the most brilliant minds we have ever had the pleasure and honor of working with to bring Tyler to justice. To our family, friends, and coworkers, church family, and even perfect strangers, thank you for your prayers and support throughout all of this last year. We live in the most wonderful and supportive community. Laura, I love you and I miss you every single day. I was so looking forward to experiencing the incredible journey of motherhood with you, and for me finally becoming an aunt, and I think that I am an aunt today still. You and Reed are at peace and our family is safe now. And today we finally get to rebuild our life and only remember your loving presence as nothing but joy in God's perfect light. Thank you all.
And finally, John Cotty, Laura's brother-in-law.
I'd like to start as well by thanking everybody, but first and foremost, my amazing in-laws and my wife and my 2 children at home. We've been through a lot this past year. I'd like to thank the law enforcement. Everybody's been amazing. All of our attorneys, The media has been respectful. It's been hard, and we're able to kind of move forward a little bit after today. Last Labor Day started like any other of the previous 9, celebrating my wedding anniversary and coaching football Friday nights under the lights. And soon after that game ended on Friday night, the last time I saw Laura and the last text message that I received from her, I'll quote it for you because I still have it. It says, "Happy anniversary on becoming my brother 10 years ago. And yes, also marrying my sister, that too, heart emojis. There was never in-law involved in our relationship. She was my sister, and as she would tell everybody, I was her brother, and that's how it was. And we're going to miss her. She was a amazing person, daughter, teacher, sister, and she was an amazing aunt to my 2 boys at home. The biggest thing is that, you're never prepared for this, and you always think in your head what you'll say if you have the opportunity and what you'll tell somebody. And I've said for the last year that I was going to be completely positive and not let my emotions get the best of me. And if I ever had the chance to speak to him, what would I say? And this morning when my phone rang and my wife told me the news, it became completely clear as to what I had to say and what I needed to do. And that basically was to summarize to her that he had been not showing up for anything important for 10 years. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, he had never shown up. So why would he show up today? And I'd like to just say that he stood our family up for the last time today. Thank you.
Can I say, we want to get to the PowerPoint presentation and show you some of the evidence. I'll entertain a couple of questions quickly.
You got Kevin Lewis, ABC 7.
Okay.
John, I just wanted to know, and I think the question on everyone's mind is, after all of this last year and his reported phone calls and trying to delay this trial, putting the family through so much, not pleading guilty, only to apparently take his own life. As you've talked about this in your office, what's the best line as to why he didn't?
Look, the man is a psychopath. He literally lies about stuff that it's meaningless to lie about. He has been able to deceive and manipulate virtually everybody in these different universes that he kept spinning all the time. He continues to lie, even to this day, to some of the people closest to him. I think today was where it was all going to crush down on him, and the weight. He knew the discovery, he knew the evidence, and he knew today was the reckoning. And I think he took the coward's way out, not being able to sustain himself and confront and deal with all the other people that he had been lying to, deceiving and manipulating for all these years. And so why today? Because Donna was going to stand up and for 2 hours lay out the evidence against him that was going to make him into a horrid creature who had committed an unspeakable act. He had killed a woman he pretended to love and took the life of his own child. Look, part of the evidence in this case, by the way, is that that child was his. He was the father. There is no other father. He murdered the woman and his own child.
Got Mike Holbrook, WJZ 13.
Have you ever seen a case like this? And can you say whether Mr. Tessier was on suicide watch at any time?
Can I say, I apologize for not raising that issue before. We were watching him in court yesterday. We saw no changes in his demeanor. I did speak briefly to his defense attorney and asked him if he had noticed anything. The answer is no. No one in the jail saw anything. I will tell you that there was no observed conduct on behalf of Mr. Tessier that would have indicated that what happened this morning was about to happen, and that's whether you're talking about look, we listened to his jail calls last night. He made calls last night from the jail to his mother. We listened to it this morning, and he was talking about what clothes he was going to wear to court today. So there was nothing that would have given you the hint that this was a man about to take his own life. Now, if we had gone through his cell, read his handwriting, read those notes, we might have had a different impression, but there was nothing that gave us reason that it was necessary to put him on suicide watch. In his cell.
This morning?
Yeah, they were found in his cell. There was more than one note, and they were in a series of envelopes, and each envelope contained more than one note. But beyond that, again, I'll wait for the police to release the details concerning what's in the notes and to whom they were written.
Please identify yourself.
Joy Lambert of WBFS. Did any of those notes indicate guilt?
They did not. Okay.
Please, Kate Amara, WDAL.
We spoke to some jurors after there were disputes who were wondering who will be held accountable because this person wouldn't be. And I know that there was we don't know all your evidence, but we know that there's a lot of other, a lot of owned the property and people who talked about. Look, any sort of.
No, can I say, I do not believe that there's any other evidence that would suggest there was any other person that was involved in this killing. I don't believe there's anybody else who was chargeable in this matter. We don't think that there was. Look, he was a pretty isolated guy. He didn't have a lot of friends. He didn't he tried to enlist after he killed Laura about 9:34 in the morning on the Sunday after he killed her. He did text somebody to help him clean up a mess and help him move a car at night to Baltimore. He was looking for some help getting rid of Laura's car in Baltimore, but he didn't have a lot of friends. He had some friends, but any people he had, he kept them isolated. No one else is criminally implicated in this case but Tyler Tessier.
Okay, we got Chris Gordon with NBC4.
I think what members of the public would like to know and are struggling with was how does a man who's about to stand trial for murder commit suicide in a jail that has safeguards and if I'm not mistaken, had a recent suicide in July of a man convicted for first-degree murder for killing a pregnant fiancee and sentenced to life without parole. That was in July. Here we are in September. How did this happen?
May I say again? I think that particular question is better directed to corrections, and I would again, the only thing I can tell you is that there was not information that I am aware of that would have indicated that Mr. Tessier was contemplating doing this, and I appreciate your question. I think, again, I can't speak to anything that would have indicated an alarm bell was going off for us. But again, I think that's, I understand your question, but I think that's better directed to them.
Neil Augenstein, WTOP.
Mr. Wallen, Mr. Tessier is dead in Maryland. He could not have gotten the death penalty, but he has died without hearing the word guilty. Your thoughts on that?
It is extremely frustrating for everyone who has worked for a year on this case. We were anxious to try this case. We would have loved to put forth all of the evidence in this case, and we feel, look, in a much different way, we feel robbed of the opportunity to show what this case was all about. I would say frustration, maybe not surprise. Maybe if you knew the true character of Tyler, maybe it's not even surprising because of his character. But I think frustrated, disappointed that we don't have the opportunity to try the case. We worked so hard to prepare.
You got Scott Broom with WSA 9.
You may cover this in your briefing.
Okay.
Cover this in your briefing, in case you will. Could you talk to us a little bit about the purported alibi story that you gave investigators suggesting that there was some kind of abduction or something like that?
Yeah. Can I say? I think that we will touch upon that in the presentation. It was part of the statement made on the 13th that we were not going to use. He did talk about being abducted by 3 men, and yes, we will talk about that in the context of.
Questions, Bob Barter, Fox 5. John, if Mr. Tessier had admitted his involvement in this at one point, you said it was reported, but you couldn't.
There was such an overwhelming wealth of information that showed he was involved in this there was a question. Whenever you're trying a case, you want to make sure that if it ever gets appealed, it gets upheld. There was an issue that we thought was a close issue as to whether or not there was some question about whether he had invoked his right to an attorney. We read the transcripts, we listened to it, we researched it, we talked among ourselves, and we thought, you know what? Our case against him is so good, we won't even use that, and that's a heck of a thing to walk away from. Someone's admitting that they shot somebody in the back of the head. That's how strong the evidence against this guy was.
So, John, if he admitted it, and here on the morning of the trial he kills himself, why did it come this far? Was there ever any plea negotiation, or
He never. There was never any plea negotiations. There was never any plea negotiations in this case. No discussion. No off. Look, he contends he's not guilty, and wanted a trial, and so there was nothing to discuss. Yeah. Oh, look. Can I say to you? I think even his final version is not true. I mean, parts of it are true, but parts of it are not true.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and do this presentation. If you need a couple of minutes to break out and do your thing, we can do that, but I would suggest you remain for this presentation. Mr. McCarthy?
Look, may I say, we're going to probably do this interactively with all three of us at some point in time talking, but I'm going to let Donna Fenton begin the presentation and orient you to what we have to show you. Donna.
So this is a little bit of a strange situation because we've been working on this case for Mary and I and John over a year. We were in the field when her body was recovered, and we have come to know and love the Wallen family in preparation of this trial. So part of what I intended to do in my opening was to introduce you to how special a person Laura was. And I think I texted her sister a few weeks ago and said, the more I get to know about her, I think we would have been really good friends, because she was a joyous, happy person, and it just comes through in absolutely everything that we have learned about her. We know that she was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a teacher, and she was a mother. She was pregnant with a baby boy that she had named Reed. We don't know how much of that would have been able to come out in trial, but we had intended to talk about her son, Reed, who was as well murdered as a result of her murder. So I want to walk through a little bit about how it was she came to be executed and how it was that the police did such an amazing job in pinning him down, because he might not have heard the word guilty, but it was going through his head every single minute since he committed this horrible crime, and everything he did to try to cover it up. So this all started exactly a year ago. So Labor Day weekend of 2017, Laura was with her family at a football game coached by her brother-in-law. And that weekend, she told her family that the defendant had a multi-day surprise for her, that they were going to spend the weekend together, that they were going to have a great time. Her family invited her to go away with them for the weekend, and she said, no, I have plans with Tyler. And that Friday night, when she told her mother and sister that, they had no idea that that would be the last time that they would see her. So we'll get back to Labor Day weekend in a little bit, because there's a lot of background to cover. So I may have been showing this picture, and I thought about taking it out of my presentation because he doesn't deserve to have Laura that close to him. But I will tell you, over the course of a 10-year relationship, this is one of only 2 photographs that exist of the defendant and Laura together. And one is in Halloween costume 10 years ago. He forbid Laura from posting anything on social media. He forbid her from talking about him extensively. And she bought it. And you'll hear why in a bit, but there was one photograph of them, and that was recovered from her home. So Laura and Tyler started dating 10 years ago, on and off, for years. It was rocky, but they got back together always got back together. However, in 2010, he started dating another young woman. And that woman actually moved in with him, where he signed a lease, and they lived together here in Montgomery County. That was in 2012. And from that point on, he led a double life. He kept both of these women available to him by telling each woman the exact same lie. He told Laura that this other woman was crazy, obsessed with him, stalking him, and the best thing to do was leave her alone. He told the woman he lived with that Laura was crazy. Laura was stalking him. Laura was actually schizophrenic and wouldn't leave them alone. To the point of, over the course of the relationship, we learned that the defendant asked friends to call the various women and pretend to be police officers, saying they were investigating the stalking and the harassment by other women. So back in 2015, the defendant contacted Mark Wallen and asked for her hand in marriage. And it was at that point in time that Mr. Wallen gave that permission, but nothing was done. 2 years passed with no engagement proposal, promises of it to Laura for years and years, which she detailed to her family. In the spring of 2017, Laura and this is Laura in June of 2017. And you'll notice Jen was going to testify today, and she's wearing the necklace that Laura made, and she wanted to wear that today because this is such a beautiful picture of her. So Laura and Tyler that June were supposed to go to a wedding in Texas. He bought the tickets. He said they had to meet at the airport, and he stood her up. He failed to show at the airport, and she went to the wedding by herself. This is a picture that she sent to her family from the wedding saying, "I am done with him. We are over. He has stood me up the last time. And she sent that picture, and her family, I'll tell you, they were thrilled. They knew that with their support, she could get through it. She would not go back to him, and she returned home. They had a long breakup email exchange, which I'm not even going to show you, but it's just the two of them after she returned from Texas, where they're professing their love for one another, but she says she is done. She says she is absolutely done with him. So when she returned home from Texas, she learned she was pregnant. The defendant was the only man she had been with. No doubt that this was his child. She told her parents, she told her family. They knew she was going to be an amazing mother, and they actually said to her, you don't have to tell him. We're here with you. You do not have to tell him. Laura, they'll tell you, knew her own mind, and about a week later, they were back together, full on. Until July 13th. On July 11th, we can go 3 ahead. That. Okay. So on July 11th, Mark Wallen, her dad, reached out to him and said, "I want to talk to you about your intentions and motivations regarding your daughter." And the defendant called Mr. Wallen, and they agreed to meet up. And they met up on July 13th of 2017 at the Starbucks in Olney. They met there, and at that time, Mark put the question to him. Mark said, "What do you intend to do? We're gonna get married. I love her." He was asked specifically about the other woman, and he looked Mr. Wallen dead in the eye and said he had not seen her in 2 years. He lived with her. He talked again about proposing to Laura, and he actually pulled an engagement ring out of his pocket and showed it to Mr. Wallen. When they separated that afternoon, they were talking about wedding plans and what they should do to get married before too much more time had passed. That was the last time Mr. Wallen saw Mr. Tessier. You would learn that on the night of July 13th, the defendant used that exact same engagement ring and proposed marriage to the woman he was living with. The exact same ring. As August of 2017 continued, Laura was preparing for the baby. She was preparing to go back to school. Laura always knew about the woman with whom Tyler had been close. They had met once. She had reached out to her a few times over the years and had actually reached out to her by Facebook. But on August 28th, which is the Monday before Labor Day, the Monday before she was killed, she texted Ms. Wagner and wrote this. "I realize this is pretty awkward, but if you wouldn't mind giving me a call, I'd really appreciate it. It's important that some things are cleared up. I would imagine that if you were in my position, you'd want some answers as well. By no means is this an attempt at a confrontation, just looking for an explanation, woman to woman." Well, when this woman received this text, she was livid. She said, "This psychotic woman, once again, will not leave us alone." She called Tyler. She texted Tyler. She said, "I will not stand for this." Pardon the language, but this is the text that the defendant sent to the woman with whom he lived, his fiancée at this point in time, starting with, "Like this day could get any worse." He refers to Laura negatively. "I literally could kill her." That was done on August 28th, 6 days before she was murdered. So that week, Tyler and his fiancée met with a Montgomery County police officer because she insisted. She wanted to know what we could do to stop Laura from stalking them. They met with the officer, and the officer explained, "You would need to go to court and get a protective order where a judge would listen to all the evidence and he would make a decision. But all parties would be present in court and everyone would be under oath." And Tyler knew that he could not let that happen. That weekend, Labor Day, he was supposed to go out of town with his fiancée where she was going bridesmaids dress shopping. That morning at 7:45, he faked a knee injury. He called to her, yelled to her, "I can't walk, I can't walk." She left without him. He was then home alone. And he spent that night with Laura. They went out on a date. They went out to dinner, but they ended up in a field in Montgomery County. And he was out of the truck that he was using. He was driving his friend's green truck. And I'll defer to John if you want to talk about these text messages. If you want.
No, that's
keep going.
Okay. What happens is the defendant takes Laura out on an adventure. She texts with Jen. And quite candidly, I will tell you, I think our feeling was he was probably going to kill her that night, but for the fact Laura winds up taking a picture when they're out in the field because he's showing her a location where he wants to buy a farm that he suggests is up for sale, and he's going to build a house for Laura and for their child that they're about to have. This is a picture that is taken in that field. At the very bottom of the picture in the left-hand corner is approximately where Laura is standing. Now, what becomes chilling about this photograph is that ultimately we locate where that photograph was in a field behind a farm where the defendant regularly worked. That picture is taken by Laura Wallen in the field in the precise location where her body will be recovered on the 13th of September. He takes her to the spot where she will be buried, and her body is found in this precise location on the 13th of July. That's why we wanted to go there. So, look, these are some other texts. Laura has no idea where she is. She thinks she's up in Frederick County, and by the way, the defendant's actually even saying to her that she is in Frederick County, not in Montgomery County, to kind of throw her off. So when she's texting Jen, she goes, look, I don't even know where I am. I'm out on an adventure. Again, we think her life was going to end that night. So basically what happens is their texting goes back and forth, and the defendant becomes aware of the fact that Laura has texted her sister Jen, so he then takes a picture and sends a text to Jen. Jen would testify that in the 10 years she's known Tyler, he never sent her a picture before. And he writes, and it's kind of disturbing, hey Jen, it's Tyler, are you nervous for her? Kind of a very bizarre thing. And that is Laura sitting in the car with him on this adventure in a field where she doesn't know where she is. It's raining and drizzling that night too. It's not exactly a perfect night to be out walking in a field 1.2 miles off the roadway back in the middle of nowhere, and you know where you are. So that was on Saturday. Then we go to Sunday. By the way, what happens is we have a video, and the reason we put this video in here is the last time that Laura's seen is about 9:36 in the evening. She goes to a Safeway a couple of blocks from her house, apparently to pick up some seltzer water or something like that. She's pregnant, helps settle her stomach. The reason this video would have been shown to the jury, it's the last time she's actually seen alive by anybody. And number two, what happens here is it goes back to what Donna was talking about a second ago. If we had called the young woman that he was engaged to, who said he couldn't get in the car with her to go pick up the bridesmaids' outfits, she had to help him to the couch. He could not walk. You watch him walk in this video. There's nothing wrong with him. This is a picture taken the same day, hours after he faked the injury, so that he didn't have to get in the car with the other woman that he was engaged with, because the opportunity was perfect. That woman was out of town because she was going to get her wedding gowns. Stiles, who lived on the farm, Chris Stiles, who owned the farm, never went away. He was gone, the other woman was gone, and he had 3 days to accomplish it. He had access to the farm, it was isolated fields, and Chris Stiles' cars and trucks that he would have needed for the burial as well as the movement of the body had all their keys in it, and there was a skid loader that he used to dig the grave in this particular case, and the keys to the skid loader were there. And I will tell you, based on the measurements at the grave site, once it was discovered, the skid loader perfectly matched up to the dig that was in the dirt, moving it. He used Stiles' skid loader, and he also used a .22 caliber rifle that was accessible in Stiles' in his garage. He actually had four .22 caliber weapons, and I listened to what Gwen said before, and I will tell you, and this is disturbing. They slaughtered calves and animals many times using the .22 caliber weapon, and I will tell you, they demonstrated for me when I went to this particular location how they slaughtered the animals. And I will tell you, the nature of the gunshot wound to the back of Laura's head directly paralleled the nature and the way in which they slaughtered the animals that they brought in for butchering at the shop. It was a method, ironically, I think they call it a humane kill. I don't think we would call it the same.
So that Sunday of Labor Day weekend, Jen and Laura have a little bit further text exchange. She gets a text saying, we're going out for more of an adventure. She says, good. no news of an engagement. Then Monday comes, Labor Day. And this is when, you might have heard, there were disturbing texts. And these are texts from Laura's phone to her sister, where, that's the Sunday one, but this is the Monday. So these were just very shocking to her sister. Her sister was floored by the information which was contained in this, which was essentially to say that Tyler's so fabulous, he was not the father, I have to go find the real father. And Jen, as is her norm with her sister, and they talk all the time, said, call me. And she didn't call. Continued to text, leaving that lengthy text message. And Jennifer knew that that was not from her sister. When they came back to Albany, they went to her house. Her candles were burning, her dog was there, and they were growing annoyed at that point at Laura that she was not responding to them. To the extent Mr. Wallen sent her a text, you're worrying your mother. You need to contact us right away, with no contact. Jen and Mr. Wallen reached out to Tyler. They asked about their last moments together, and he said he had last seen her and made plans to meet with her that Monday morning in Columbia at the mall to talk. That Tuesday, the defendant is interviewed by the Montgomery County Police for the first time. Detective Buck Reese of the 4th District Section did an informational gathering interview with him. He came in voluntarily to the station, and the jury would have seen this entire exchange between Sergeant Reese and the defendant. And I'll defer again to Mr. McCarthy.
The first interview, Detective Reese is actually present here with us today. The first interview with Detective Reese is probably notable more for what is left out than not. He professes repeatedly his love for Laura and wanting to find Laura and the child, but at the same time makes absolutely no mention of the fact, as a matter of fact, he tells Detective Reese he lives with his mother and father and gives an address, where in fact he's been living at a different location with the woman that he's engaged to for 7 years. He doesn't mention the other woman. He doesn't mention that he's not told her about the pregnancy. It is as if she is a non-entity, which ultimately, as the investigation continues, once they realize he is professing love for one woman, completely ignoring he's having this ongoing relationship with the second, once the police in their investigation realize there's a second woman, the bells and whistles are going off, he's not being honest with us. The next day, there is a second interview with Detective Reese, and in that interview, Detective Reese begins to confront him with his lies, and he admits that there is this other girl. Tells her her name, tells her what she is, but he's pretending that we've really broken up before. Things become crashing down because he's talking about both the relationship with the first girl and the second girl. And the note that Donna tells you here, that besides the fact that Jen said there's something suspect about it, there's the misspelling of a name in this, that I don't believe it's from my sister, I will tell you ultimately in one of the versions, the defendant wrote this. This email was not written definitively because in version 27, he takes credit for actually having written this text message. This is a diversion, something that the defendant does dozens of times during the course of the investigation. He tries to throw the investigation in a different direction. In the email he sends out on Monday, he says Antoine. When he talks to Detective Reese on Tuesday, he talks about a guy named John, and he talks about another guy she dated. No mention of the name Antoine. As a matter of fact, when asked about Antoine, he says, I never ever heard of the name Antoine. And he says that like on Wednesday, but on Monday, we find out in the course of the investigation, he was writing about Antoine, trying to divert the attention of the investigation in that direction.
So that Thursday, as you all may know, her driver's license had been found Monday morning at 10 a.m. in an apartment complex in Columbia. Her car was found that same time. There was no sign of foul play in the car. Her front license plate had been removed. The car was brought back to Montgomery County. At this point in time, other investigators are being brought in. Detective Katie Leggett and Detective Mark Janney from Major Crimes get involved, and they reach out to him, to the defendant, and set a time to meet him. There's a 3-hour interview of him done that night. I'm sorry, back up. This is where her driver's license was found. This is her car. You'll notice the front tag was missing. That's how the car was parked, backed in. Ultimately, the defendant admits to bringing the car there and leaving it there for her. But that Wednesday, he sits down again with the police and again proceeds to tell them a whole slew of lies, an entire slew of lies, ranging from where he lived, what car he was driving when they were going to meet up, when they last saw each other. It is at that point in time that Detective Leggett raises with him, would you participate in a press conference? Would you come on camera with the Wallens and beg for the woman you love to come home? And he agrees to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a setup. And on July 11th, despite being told by his parents and girlfriend, don't you dare do this, he went on camera that you all saw and begged for her safe return. Actually, someone asked a question, I think it was Dan Morse at the very end, that said, can you tell us about your last conversation with her? And he fumbled and stumbled and said, I don't know where she is. That's all. That was on the 11th. He was then interviewed for approximately 3 hours that afternoon, where he continued to provide information to the officers, to include several awful things he said about Laura and who the father of the baby was. He told them she ran away. She needed to disappear. She needed time to get away, and I needed to help her. So I have no idea where she is, no idea what happened, but she was supposed to get in touch with me last week, and she didn't. But he's never told anybody that. So as that interview winds down, you'll see that, or you would have seen in this interview at the conclusion, he admits to moving her car. He admits to having her phone and sending those text messages to her family. He admits to removing the license plate from her vehicle. And right after that, the police started investigating the trackers that they had utilized in this case on Tyler's cars. And they found a tracker ping the day before the press conference, Sunday morning. I believe it was on the 10th, the day before the press conference, that the vehicle had been in this back field behind Chris Stiles' house at 9:25 the morning before the press conference. This was where she was buried. And he had indicated to police that he had gone back to the field where they had been on the previous Saturday night to see if she was there, because he was looking for her. He told police that where they were on Saturday night was a property that was for sale half in Montgomery County, half in Frederick County. That area was searched. It was not the place. So the police then made the decision that they were going to conduct a search at Stiles' property. That was done with numerous officers, with forensics to collect evidence. Most importantly, officers who are on four-wheelers, because the only way to access this location is through a four-wheel drive vehicle. And it's vast, and it is up and down and down and up. And if you could get to that back corner, you knew this property by heart. So Detective Pat Skiba with Search and Rescue was on his four-wheeler, and he was searching the grid behind this area. And he came down the hill, and he saw what you'll see in just a second. Keep going, up there. That's the very first photograph that Detective Skiba took when he was riding down the hill and saw this patch of purple fabric. It was Laura, and she was recovered on the 13th. A search was done of the property. Mary, do you want to talk about the items that were recovered?
So the search was done of the property. It was found that Tyler had actually called Chris Stiles on Saturday evening asking for the combination to the safe. And he did keep some paperwork in that safe that were for some vehicles, but also contained within the safe were 22 rifles. And they were never able to determine which rifle was actually the weapon that was used. They all used the same caliber weapon, projectiles. There was also another weapon that was found, the one on the left, which is a shorter barrel 22, which was kept in a general area that everybody used. And that was recovered on scene. They exhumed Laura's body. They did not find any other evidence within where she was removed from. They documented everything that they did, took pictures, took photographs to kind of show how this property really changed and how it varied. Because some of the photographs that we have, especially the one earlier where the burial site is located, just looking at the photograph, it looks very flat. And if you look at kind of the topographical maps, it all looks very flat. This picture really shows the vastness of it and how it really undulates. And detectives documented everything showing the vastness of it. So when you look at the picture, Laura was actually found down in this area, and Chris Stiles' residence is up here. So it's actually quite a vast area.
And you couldn't see anything from Laura's grave. You couldn't see a house, you couldn't see over the hill. When Judge Mason reserved on our request to bring the jury here, we went out 2 weeks ago and actually utilized drone footage that we would be able to show the jury the true lay of the land.
And also the path that we think that the defendant took from the barn with the skid loader and driving along the road, going up and down in order to get to the area where Laura was.
And on the day of the killing, which was September 3rd, Laura was seen getting into a white truck. The defendant had access to a white truck, and he was seen by a woman who lived in an adjoining townhouse to Laura, and she'd known Laura, even talked to Laura about her pregnancy, and she had seen Tyler before. She saw there was a male driving the truck. He had a hat on. She didn't recognize it as Tyler, but recognized the truck that Laura got into at about 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday the 3rd, looking like the truck that Tyler had driven before. Then you just follow the pinging of the cell phones. Both Laura and the defendant's cell phone bring them to this location. They're both there. Both phones are pinging at the same location on Sunday morning. Laura's never seen again. And about 9:36 is when he begins his phone calls to a young man he says, I have a mess I need to clean up, and I need to move. I need to get rid of a car, and I'd like to take it to Baltimore at night. That young man does not agree. He thinks it's a lousy idea. Their conversation goes on during the course of the day. But I am telling you, we believe the government's proof is that Laura was killed that morning, lured back. Look, did he promise the right ring? Did he promise an engagement, a promise of marriage? What got her back there a second time? We don't know, other than she clearly was brought there, both her phone, her body being found there, and the fact that essentially, I think the evidence suggests the two of them were seen leaving her apartment about 8 o'clock in the morning that day on their way to where her body's ultimately found.
Just a few quick more points. Oh, I'm sorry. Just very briefly, evidence would have come out that over the course of the last 10 years, while he was having the relationship with these two women, he was involved with numerous other women, romantically and sexually. He had lied to those women about the fiance and Laura. He told numerous people he suffered from brain cancer. Many, many people would have testified that he told them that he had brain cancer. There was one woman who would have testified, who was interviewed by the police, who the defendant asked to lie for him because she picked him up from Columbia Mall after he brought the car there. And he called her and said, if the police call you, lie to them. She had no idea why he was asking that, but as she was brought into the police station to be interviewed, she said, I'm not getting involved in this. And she proceeded to tell the police that he had asked her to lie, and actually did a phone sting, a recorded hour-long call with him the night after the press conference. It's at that point in time he tells her that they put drops in his eyes during the press conference to make it appear as if he was crying. They had an earpiece in his ear, the police were telling him exactly what to say during the police conference, and numerous other lies that he said he had signed a document that he could officially lie in a press conference. He told numerous individuals that. Evidence would have shown conclusively that he was the father of the baby. Evidence would have shown conclusively the tracking, the path that he took, both in killing her and in disposing of her car up in Columbia. There's probably a million other pieces of evidence that would have come out, but they're finite, but each piece, to the point of saying there's a great place to bury a body in this field, all of those things would have come out. He started that week with, I literally could kill her. And by the end of the week, that Saturday night when he was in the field, we think Jen saved Laura's life, that it didn't happen. But it did that Sunday morning while his fiancée was away, while Chris Stiles was away, where he had the whole entire property to himself. This was planned, it was deliberate, it was premeditated, and the state had absolutely no doubt that this defendant would have been found guilty of first-degree murder. We had requested and filed for a sentence that the defendant, if convicted of first-degree murder, be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. That was what the defendant was facing in court today.
Again, it's hard to condense 3 weeks into 30 minutes, or 40 minutes. Does anybody have it? We'll take a couple of questions. If you have a direct question that was not answered, we'll take the questions. Otherwise, we're going to adjourn. Yes, Paul, yeah, Bob. Was taken Saturday night. Yes.
September 2nd, at about 7 p.m.
Right.
He took it with his phone and sent it to her sister.
Right.
And it was a cover-up to Laura texting her sister about
Right.
the field, and you realized, hey, I gotta clean this up.
Yep. I think that's exactly what happened.
And we know that that is Stiles' vehicle.
You got Kay tomorrow with Billy B.
Can we go just back to that tearful press conference? And you could tell that detectives were watching and paying attention to it. Can you explain why you decided to stage that? At that point, were you trying to get more information?
Overall, I think the suggestion, we wanted him to keep talking. We wanted him to keep talking, and at the same time, in order to keep him talking, you wanted him to not know that he was the primary suspect in the case, and therefore you enlisted him. And the Wallens knew this. They were briefed on this, and they were asked whether or not they would participate in this. I mean, I'll tell you, it's extraordinary that they were able to do what they did because they needed to keep him talking because every time they talked to him, they developed more information, and they wanted him to think they were looking for other suspects, trying to find Laura, when in reality, they wanted to keep him talking about the investigation, and he did.
May I ask one more question?
Okay.
Is there any case, I know you don't have the bullet.
The bullet was recovered. It was just deformed because of what it hit when it went into Laura's body.
Is there any direct evidence tying him, saying definitively, this is an extremely strong circumstantial case, but given that he
You mean other than the fact he said he shot her in the back of the head?
Yeah, no,
You mean other than that?
Yes, I mean, any physical pieces.
I think the phones really.
It wouldn't bleed.
Yeah.
Circumstantial evidence at trial.
I think the cell phone records, the cell phone records just are over the tracking information, the cell phone record stuff in this case, placing them uniquely in that location at precisely when the murder occurred. And if you look at it, it is absolutely overwhelming. And if you begin to see the series of statements, and you begin to see this like absolute avalanche of lies from one story to the other, you begin to realize, look, for some of you who covered Lululemon, it reminded me a lot of the Brittany Norwood case, where Brittany told a series of lies, and by the end you recognize it bore a lot of similarities to that succession of statements made in that case by an individual defendant.
But just wondering, was there any blood evidence or did he do such a good job of covering up that?
No, look, he shot her in the field, and quite candidly, because of where the bullet struck in the brainstem, she died very, very quickly. And as a result, you would not have expected a lot of blood. This was not and never was a bloody crime scene because of the nature in which and the way in which she was shot.
I'm sorry?
Say and spell your name.
Donna Fenton, Fenton.
Mary Herdman, Herdman.
Mary Herdman, H-E-R-D.
Yes.
Donna, is your position assistant district attorney?
Assistant State's Attorney, both of us.
Okay, everyone, thanks for coming. Please sign in over here if you want some electronic versions of some of the pictures from this presentation, which we can make available to you. I need your email, phone number, and organization that you represent. It's on the table. There's a sign-in sheet there. Please fill that in. That way we can send it to you ASAP. I know you're trying to get your stories together. Thanks again for coming out.
All right, guys, back live in the newsroom here. If you're watching with us on YouTube or on our website, that was all of the evidence very clearly laid out that would have been presented in trial had that trial taken place today. But this morning, Tyler Tessier took his own life, allegedly in his cell, and quite an interesting press conference. If you guys were on with us for the past year, of course, this is a case that happened last Labor Day, so September 2017, and really just a complete shocker to the community, to the whole DMV region. This case was really incredible and really enthralling too. You didn't want to miss sort of a minute of the sting operations and what exactly happened, and very, very tragic, of course, in the end as well. 31-year-old Laura Wallen dead, as well as her unborn baby, and now the suspect in that case not able to stand trial. He allegedly killed himself this morning in his cell. So that is that, guys. That was live from Montgomery County this morning, so a localized story. We're also still tracking, of course, the congressional, or rather, the hearings on the Hill for SCOTUS nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Those are going on. They're kind of in and out today. You can see now the almost sort of empty hearing room there of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He'll be coming back in. It's sort of a day-long process, and this is day 3 of that process. It'll be going on all week. And once they come back up, we'll make sure we take that for you guys and split the screen to give you sort of the best angle of what's happening inside that hearing room. But while we have you guys back and that's still on break, let's go over to some of the top stories of today, including how about that anonymous op-ed that was published in the New York Times. Still sort of a question as to who, if anyone, in the inside of the administration wrote that, and it's sort of a big mystery, and it's definitely causing a lot of news headlines this morning. So a summary of that story and some other top stories next.
Parlor game that's going to play out for a while. Who is this senior official who claims to be part of the resistance within the Trump administration? It is an extraordinary move by the New York Times, agreeing to publish an anonymous piece written by someone only described as a senior administration official. It calls this a 2-track presidency, with the president saying one thing and some of his top staffers actively conspiring against him, working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations.
This is what we have to deal with.
President Trump, at an event with law enforcement at the White House, railed against the Times. In a tweet, he appeared to ask whether the writer had committed treason and called on the Times to identify the person.
If the failing New York Times has an anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous, meaning gutless, a gutless editorial. We're doing a great job.
It has been a 1-2 punch, following excerpts this week from journalist Bob Woodward's critical upcoming book on the administration. Now, one of the president's most vocal critics on the right said he wasn't surprised.
It didn't reveal much to me. I understand this is the case, and that's why I think all of us encourage the good people that are around the president to stay.
But the op-ed was also a mixed bag, with the writer praising many actions taken by the administration.
This is a rather small-minded criticism of a person they really don't like in meetings, but they concede that on the big things that we elect presidents for, this president's made a lot of progress.
Now, as to the writer's identity, at one point, the Times, in a tweet, referred to the writer as he, but then later said that that was sent in error, and senior administration official could apply to hundreds of people. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
Allegations of shadow banning were brought into the light today as Twitter's CEO revealed why some conservative users saw their accounts affected in ways liberal users didn't.
What did the algorithm take into account that led to prominent conservatives, including members of the U.S. House of Representatives, not being included in auto search suggestions?
We were using a signal of the behavior of the people following accounts. And we didn't believe, upon further consideration and also seeing the impact, which was about 600,000 accounts.
Dorsey says some Democratic lawmakers had the same problem but wouldn't name names. Democrats today weren't convinced there's a partisan problem.
Are you censoring people?
No.
Twitter shadow banning prominent Republicans. It's bad. Is that true?
No.
The Justice Department decided they'll see for themselves, announcing today they'll investigate to see if social media companies are, quote, intentionally stifling the free exchange of ideas. But Democrats believe Twitter has a different problem.
Repeatedly, the president uses Twitter to bully and belittle people, calling them names like dog, clown, spoiled brat, son of a bitch, enemies, and loser.
Across the Capitol, the Senate Intel Committee heard from Facebook's COO, Sheryl Sandberg, who owned up to mistakes that led to meddling in 2016.
We were too slow to spot this and too slow to act.
Now, Democratic Senator Mark Warner is starting to talk about social media companies being regulated by the government.
Would that go as far as actually having a policy on your platform indicating, I wouldn't ask you to take down them, but at least allowing the user to know whether that contact was initiated by a human being versus a machine?
As far as we can detect them.
Google's CEO was invited and didn't show.
They're not here today, and maybe it's because they're arrogant, or maybe it's because there's a report that, as of last night, this was posted at 3:36 yesterday, this group went on basically pretending to be Kremlin-linked trolls. They did everything. They used the details of the Internet Research Agency, which is a Kremlin-linked troll farm, and were able to buy ads online
I spoke to one Republican member of the committee who doesn't think anybody really landed any punches on Dorsey, but that doesn't mean that Republicans are satisfied with what they heard from him today because they think he claimed not to know about things that he should know about. On Capitol Hill, Peter Ducey, Fox News.
Very, very deep, intense cough, violently sick, going into the bathroom a lot.
A flight from Dubai to New York City becoming a petri dish with wings Wednesday. Sickness spreading throughout the cabin, forcing Emirates Flight 203 to be isolated following touchdown at New York's JFK.
If it is virus, why did they allow them on the flight? I sat with them for 13 hours. So if it is virus, we're all breathing the same.
The more than 500 on board going through health screenings. 3 passengers and 7 crew members being taken to the hospital for symptoms that included coughing, headaches, and fever.
People are worried, because you don't know what it is. So you're getting down there and guys have got their masks on their noses and stuff like that. So it's like you're playing from hell.
The airline apologizing for the incident, but many on board saying it's not enough, insisting the sick passengers should never have been allowed on board in the first place.
I think that there's, a certain amount of personal responsibility, but then also it's Emirates' responsibility. If I was saying before, if you don't let a drunk person board a plane, why would you let somebody that's violently ill board a plane?
Rapper Vanilla Ice among those on the flight. The one-hit wonder tweeting, quote, "This is crazy. Apparently there is over 100 people sick on the bottom floor. So happy I'm up top." The CDC checking all those on board before allowing them to clear customs. They'll be keeping tabs on the sick passengers in the days ahead. In New York, David Lee Miller, Fox News.
I don't see why he's still on the streets. He should be in prison.
Tensions riding high in the Windy City as jury selection in the trial of Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke gets underway. The officer is accused of fatally shooting 17-year-old Laquan McDonald 16 times as he walked down the middle of a city street holding a knife.
It's time Jason Van Dyke to face justice for what he did to Laquan McDonald.
When McDonald was shot in October 2014, it took a year for this video to be released. When it was finally made public, it unleashed a storm of protests and resentment that is still being felt today. As protesters gathered inside Chicago's criminal court, lawyers beginning the process of picking a jury. Van Dyke is facing 6 counts of first-degree murder, official misconduct, and aggravated battery. Family members pleading for peace no matter the trial's outcome.
We're asking for complete peace. We don't want any violence before, during, or after the verdict in this trial.
This trial gets underway one day after Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel made the surprise announcement that he is not seeking a 3rd term, and he was widely accused of trying to cover up the tape that captured this alleged murder on camera. In Chicago, Matt Finn, Fox News.
Taking steps toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The leaders of the 2 nations agreeing to meet in an inter-Korean summit later this month.
On September 18 to 20 for 3 days and 2 nights in Pyongyang, and to hold high-ranking working-level talks early next week at Panmunjom to discuss protocol, security, communications, and media coverage as a part of preparations for the summit.
It's the 3rd meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. And it comes as diplomacy over North Korea's nuclear program hit an impasse, with U.S. officials growing skeptical about Kim's intent.
Regarding Punggye-ri, Kim said 2/3 of the shaft has been demolished, so the nuclear test site has been permanently disabled.
The leaders will also discuss practical measures for the denuclearization process, with President Moon serving as the chief negotiator between Pyongyang and the U.S.
Chairman Kim Jong-un reaffirmed his commitment for complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula and expressed his willingness for close cooperation not only with South Korea but also with the United States in that regard.
South Korea is also setting their sights on a 4-country summit with China and America, with the goal of a formal end to the Korean War. Kim Jong-un reportedly saying he hopes to improve his country's relationship with the U.S. within President Trump's first term in office. In New York, Jackie Ibanez, Fox News.
Don't believe you have to be like anybody to be somebody.
Nike is stepping up their ad game with quarterback turned activist Colin Kaepernick, with plans to release a new Just Do It commercial during Thursday's NFL season opener. The 2-minute video first appearing on social media and quickly going viral. Kaepernick narrates the ad, which features sports greats like Serena Williams and LeBron James. Kaepernick appears twice, the first time with an image of the American flag flowing behind him. On Tuesday, Nike also unveiled a giant billboard on top of their flagship store in San Francisco, showing the former QB's face and featuring a line from the commercial.
Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
The same words used in the polarizing print ad released last week, prompting many to take to social media to show their disapproval, burning Nike shoes and vowing to boycott the brand, while others stood behind the campaign. Kaepernick drew controversy beginning in 2016 when he took a knee during the national anthem to protest racial injustice and police brutality. Many other athletes also began kneeling to protest the social issues.
So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
Nike also plans to air the commercial during U.S. Open tennis matches, Major League Baseball games, and college football later this week. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
Russian warplanes have started bombing the rebel-held Syrian province of Idlib, killing at least a dozen civilians. It's the start of what could be the final chapter in the Syrian war, as government forces prepare for a major offensive. President Trump has warned Syria's Bashar al-Assad against launching a reckless attack on civilians, saying the U.S. would respond to the use of chemical weapons swiftly.
What you are seeing is the president saying to Iran, Russia, and Assad, don't go there. We're not going to accept it. It's not okay.
But Assad's allies are firmly behind him. Russia has troops in Syria and is providing critical air support.
The Syrian government has the full right to protect their sovereignty and to drive out, to liquidate the terrorist threat in their territory. This is the main problem in this area.
In Damascus, the Iranian foreign minister said that the hornet's nests of terrorists must be purged and announced that on Friday, Iran will host a summit with the leaders of Iran, Russia and Turkey to coordinate their next moves. There are an estimated 3 million civilians in Idlib, with around 30,000 rebels among them, of whom 10,000 are said to be linked to al-Qaeda. This is where civilians and rebels have fled from across Syria since the war started. And now this last bastion of rebel-held territory is in the crosshairs. There continues to be a major diplomatic effort to avoid a bloodbath. The UN has scheduled meetings with Turkey, Russia and Iran next week, while the US will chair a meeting of the UN Security Council on Friday. However, it does appear as if this offensive is already underway. In London, Benjamin Hall, Fox News.
Shootings, fights, and accusations of sexual crimes. A string of incidents involving Uber passengers and drivers over the last few years.
At an event here in Midtown Manhattan, Uber is trying to address those safety issues as they service more than 15 million rides a day.
Uber is rolling out a new ride check-in feature, which will track your ride off your smartphone. So if it's taking a bit longer, or if you make unexpected stops, the app will send a message to make sure everything is okay. Being anonymous is another new safety feature. Uber will now conceal a passenger's pickup and drop-off location and phone numbers.
What you're seeing is very early in the game, but features such as a 911 button that's location aware so that 911 dispatch can react to anything that might happen incredibly quickly is a huge determinant in success or failure.
Uber's new CEO is celebrating 1 year in the job. Safety, he says, is a top priority for the company. But with all the data that the company is mining off a user's smartphone, what about data privacy?
We made very significant investments in data privacy. And we do know a lot of data about you, payment information, location information, but the religion at Uber is that we're going to use that information for you, the rider or the driver.
The new safety features are already available in the app, so watch for them the next time you click in. In New York City, Susan Lee, Fox News.
I was involved in robbery.
A bad decision at 22 would cost Roby Davis his freedom.
I had to say I knew better, and I wound up going to prison.
Sentenced beyond the guidelines, up to 75 years behind bars.
I could do better. I knew I could do better. Normally I don't take from people and just be a menace to society, so, it really bothered me.
Davis spent the next 2 decades in prison, but he didn't waste a moment.
When I was in prison, I took every class that I could, went to college, and whatever program they had to offer, I signed up for, participated in, and graduated.
After meeting certain criteria, Roby Davis entered the optical program at the Gus Harrison Correctional Facility in Adrian. There, prisoners take classes, learn highly technical skills, and are trained in the optical lab where they work and make eyeglasses for every prisoner statewide.
It provides a great trade for the inmates that get out.
Like Davis, who eventually became a nationally certified optician. Matt Yeager was one of his instructors.
He was a go-getter. He wanted it, and you could just tell. And he told me from the beginning that he wanted to get out, open his own business, and start a nonprofit to help kids get glasses. And he's like, I'm gonna look you up, and I'll be waiting.
Through appeals, Davis was released from prison in 2011. He did not let his instructors down. Last year, Davis opened his own business, Rosedale Vision, in Detroit.
I'm excited about coming to work every day. I'm looking for new clients and trying to get a new smile. Our motto here is Rosedale Vision, seeing better. And we'd like to say that to everybody to get their glasses.
Although many inmates have got out of prison and entered the workforce as an optician, Davis is the first to run his own business using the skills he gained at the MDOC Optical Lab.
Well, I'm really happy for him. I'm real proud of him. It's good to see that he's actually taken this knowledge that he tried so hard to gain while he was incarcerated and actually applying it in the real world setting, and has the drive to do really well.
Davis is doing so well, he has brought his 28-year-old son on board, training him to do the same.
I can't even really say in words how proud I am, because the way he went, the way he been, like you notice he's been going for 20 years. To me, I want to be successful too, and I want to do the right thing, and that's very important to me, and I look up to my dad.
How did it fit?
These are very simple.
Students tell me quite frequently, because I have this felony, that I cannot no longer get a job. I am not employable. And no matter what I say, it falls on deaf ears a lot of times, but he's a success story that I can take back and I can share with them. I can say, see, you can do this if you want this.
Davis, now 49, is living his dream back home in the city he loves, and now inspiring others with his second chance.
When you have your freedom taken, you have a totally different perspective. I value it now when before I didn't. And in retrospect, I didn't really know the value of life. Now that I get opportunity, I take every moment and I take it all in.
Constantly on the go. Everyone always has somewhere they need to be. On Thursday, here on the side of the road in Plainfield, this is exactly where Darren Collins needed to be.
I knew that there was definitely something that was wrong.
Collins saw a car pull over and the driver fall out. He stopped his UPS truck and started running towards the teenager.
I saw him, with his hands around his throat.
Cody Kennedy couldn't breathe. He was choking on a sweet tart, and Collins knew what to do.
I decided to quickly get behind him, put my arms around his sternum, and perform the Heimlich maneuver.
A couple tries is all it took. Cody was better. Within seconds, first responders showed up, and Collins took off. The two didn't even get a chance to get each other's names.
I'm glad I was able to help you, shook his hand, and then I kind of disappeared off as, that mystery UPS man.
The mystery was solved today when the two finally met.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. No problem, man.
Collins gets the gratefulness. When he was younger, a stranger saved him too.
Our vehicle started to catch fire, and I was actually trapped in the vehicle. And there was a good Samaritan that ended up pulling over, helping my grandmother get out the vehicle and helping me get out the vehicle.
A delivery driver and a high schooler now share a special connection.
I still can't thank you enough. I don't know what I would have done.
Instead of one hero, maybe there's two, together, reminding us all to hit the brakes a bit and care a little more.
It's okay to check on somebody and make sure that they're okay and to be that good Samaritan. We all need it. You never know when you may need it yourself, so why not stop and help somebody else out?
Yeah, he's moving. Go on now. Hey, go on now. Go on now. Let me tree him. Excellent. Go on now. Go on up the tree. Go on up the tree. Go on now. Go on now. Hey.
This is what you call tough love from a man who has great respect for wildlife. Tuji Silch, a trained responder with the Bear League in South Lake Tahoe, scared this bear up a tree to teach it that it's too close to homes and people.
That's a very safe place for him right now. He'll hang out there until it's quiet, and then he'll come down. When it's dark and quiet, he'll come down and move. Yeah, I'm stressing him. I'm doing that on purpose. I want him to think that humans are horrible things and that he doesn't want to have anything to do with them. And if we can do that, if you can instill that, it gives you more of a buffer.
A buffer keeping bears wild, away from people, minimizing conflict between the two. Another useful tool in that effort, the electric bear mat. Tucci has installed about 24 of them this season in front of South Lake Tahoe homes that bears have entered.
And we bring it, we place it, and we come back and get it at no charge to the homeowner or the tenant. So if that bear came up, walked up, put a paw and touched 2 of those contacts, it's going to zap and it's not going to go any farther.
A surveillance camera at one of these properties shows a bear getting a 12,000 volt surprise and running off.
Keyword here is volts, not amperage. It's non-lethal.
Again, tough love.
And so the next time they walk by, they'll go, oh no, I don't want to go up there. We want to make sure that there's the least amount of human-bear conflict with the least amount of negative outcomes. And so that's what we're working towards with our aversions and the electric bear mats that we put out.
And everyone living in and visiting the Lake Tahoe area has a role to play in this.
We have to secure our attractants. We have to secure our spaces in our house to not allow bears to have access into those places.
It's a lot like Uber or a taxi service, except this business specifically caters to kids. All you have to do is call or text and she'll be on her way. Taking the wheel, off we go, is nothing new for Jade Watts. I have 5 boys of my own. When she was working, she was constantly thinking, how am I going to get my kid to school? How am I going to get my kid to daycare or to grandma's house? Now that she stays home, she tries to lend a hand where she can. I was helping out a friend. She had asked me if I would be able to pick up her 2 boys from school. And I thought, yeah, you know, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I could definitely help her out. And then I was thinking, well, why not help more moms out? So she decided to start a business, Weeby's Transportation. All you have to do is text, call, or Facebook message her. Hi, bud. And she'll pick up your kids for you. For the children, I wanted to make it a little more of a personal experience because you're dealing with somebody's child. That's, you know, that's their world. It's why she tries to meet parents and kids ahead of time and gets out of the car to make sure they make it in safely. Uber, you know, you order it on your phone and, you know, 5-10 minutes later, you don't know whose car you're getting into. You don't know the person. You don't know. And that's okay for adults, but it's not okay for kids. Not to mention, Uber has a policy against picking up minors on their own. Watts says she has a business license and insurance and can show you her background check. So I wanted to give them an option that's safe and dependable and reliable and that the kids will also enjoy. So how much is this going to cost you? Well, for a one-time pickup, that'll bring you about $10. For a regularly scheduled pickup, that runs at $7. And then for any trips over 6 miles, it'll be $1 a mile. In Sacramento, I'm Jessica Mensch, Fox 40 News.
Well, we're back in the newsroom here, guys, and it looks like people are starting to file back into the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room here. You can see right here, people are starting to come back, and we're going to eventually split screen this for you guys to continue on with the questioning. This is day 2 of questioning, day 3 of the hearings for SCOTUS nominee Brett Kavanaugh, but we're going to continue it on our Facebook page. So you guys can join us right there, Fox 5 DC on digital, and we will take down our stream because we are nearing 2 o'clock Eastern here. We'll be back, though, in the newsroom for more live news, live press conferences, breaking events, anything that's happening tomorrow at 11:30. So with that, you're going to take a look at this. You can see they're starting to come in here, and perfect timing actually, because they were on break for a little bit for lunch, and so we'll close it down there on digital stream here on YouTube and on the website. But catch us on Facebook for more of this hearing. And while we close down, you can take a look at Hurricane Florence. It's now been downgraded to a Category 2, and it's in the Caribbean, going westward, approaching Bermuda, putting Bermuda on notice now. So take a look at that as we roll it out, guys, and we'll catch you tomorrow.